Okay, excuse me, make sure your packet is open to 8.2 Study Guide, Linear Equations in Two Variables. So if you are on the 8.2 Study Guide, you are all set. All right, so hopefully my pen works better today than it has. So what we're doing today is solving equations that have two variables. And these functions that we are solving, these equations, can be represented with an equation. The equation such as y equals 150x is called a linear equation. It kind of looks like the equations that we did with the distance, where you had d equals, let's say the walking rate was 2, and then you had t. So it's kind of similar to that, but instead of the d and the t, there's going to be a y and an x. And it's called a linear equation because remember what happened when we did these? We made lines. So a linear equation in two variables is an equation in which the variables appear in separate terms and neither variable contains an exponent other than 1. So you can't have x squared or x to the third power. You have to have just a plain x. So this one has just x plus 1. There is a number in front of that. That number would be a 1, right? So if there was a number, it would be a 1. This one is, so it's y equals something times x plus or minus something. You have a negative x times 2. It's just like having plus 0 there. And this one is 1/3 times x, and that'd be the same as having plus 0 there as well. So the form that these are in, we're going to start seeing this more and more. This is the first time I'm showing this to you. You're not going to memorize this right now. But right now, this is the form that these equations are going to be in. The number here in front of the x, remember what we were using that for before, that is the rate. This number here is like a head start, or where something would cross the y-axis. It's called the y-intercept. And we will talk more about that later. That is not something we're going to get into right now. So linear equations can look like this. Nonlinear equations would have powers or would have division. It doesn't have the x times. If you reduce this one, it would be divide by x. This would be y equals 4 over x. So it has to be times x, so you can't do this, and these two have powers. Solutions of linear equations are ordered pairs that make it true, and one way to find solutions is to make a table. So that's what we are going to do. We're going to be making a table. I am going to be giving you the numbers that I want you to put in the table for the x values. We will then solve, find our y, and then we will have an ordered pair. So I want you to notice that these equations are in the form y equals mx plus b. Okay? So here's the m would be the 2 and the b would be the 4. So what we do is we take this part of the equation and we bring it down here. So we've got, 2x plus 4. All right. And I'm going to tell you what numbers. If there's no graph, we're going to use -1, 0, that's a 0, 1, and 2. Why? Because they're small numbers and they're easy to do in your head. But of course you can use a calculator if you'd like to. So what we do is, if this is the x value, we're replacing the x with -1. So 2 times -1 plus 4. Use your calculator if you need to, because you do not want to mess up the calculations for these, because it'll mess everything else up. So 2 times -1 is -2 plus 4 is +2. So if I have an x and I have a y, I have an ordered pair. So all I'm literally doing is recopying it. The x column is -1. The answer there for the y column was 2. So my ordered pair is -1, +2. Next, I'm going to plug in a 0 for x. So 2 times 0 plus 4 goes into the equation. And that would equal 4. 0 plus 4 is 4. Literally take the 0 from the x column, the 4 from the y column, and now you have an ordered pair of 0, 4. The next one, I've got 2 times 1 plus 4. That's 2 plus 4 is 6. So my ordered pair is 1, 6. You do need to have your parentheses around your ordered pairs, by the way. 2 times 2 plus 4. That's 4 plus 4, which is 8. And you'll see 2 and 8 here. Okay, so all I've done is replace the x with values that I picked. Solve it. That gives you what your y equals, right? And then once you have an x and a y, you have an ordered pair. All right, for this one, we're going to bring that down, negative 3 x minus 7. If you want to change that minus 7 to a plus negative when you're solving, you may. Again, I like to pick small numbers, and I always like to pick at least one negative. So I usually pick these numbers. For homework, you'll see that I've picked the numbers for you there as well. All right, so I'm going to plug in negative 3 times x, so negative 3 times negative 1 minus 7. Now, if you just type that in the calculator, you don't have to change that to plus negative, but if you're doing it in your head, you probably should. This gives me 3 plus negative 7, which is negative 4. So my x value is negative 1, my y value is negative 4. I'm going to plug in the next one, negative 3 times 0 minus 7. So that's 0 minus 7, that is negative 7. So 0 for x, negative 7 for y. I'm going to plug in negative 3 times 1 minus 7. That's negative 3 minus 7, which is negative 3 plus negative 7 if you change it, or you can just type it in the calculator like that. It'll do it for you. 1 comma negative 10 is my ordered pair. And then I've got negative 3 times 2 plus negative 7 or minus 7, whichever you prefer. That gives you negative 6 plus negative 7, which is negative 13. That gives you 2, negative 13. All right, so part of what you're going to do at homework is just fill in tables like this. And on the back side of the notes, we're going to fill in the table and then we're going to graph them. It's kind of a self-check because remember these are linear, and then when you graph them, they should make a straight line. If you notice here, the y column, that's kind of like what our distance did, how we had a pattern. These go up by 1, and notice that these are going up by 2. Do you see the rate in front of the x? That is also 2. These are going up by 1. I want you to notice here, this is not going up. This is actually going down 3. And if you look at the rate here, it has a negative in front of it. So that would indicate that the rate is going down 3 every time. And that's how you see it in the table. All right, so that's all for part 1. You're going to flip over on the back and you're going to watch 8-2 part 2.